I'd really like to just make a quick acknowledgement of country. On behalf of the team at Origin Energy, who are based throughout Queensland, I would like to take the time to complete a short acknowledgement of country as we begin. I would like to acknowledge the Jagera and Turrbal people, the traditional custodians of this land, and acknowledge their continuing spiritual connection to the country and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. Thank you. Okay, everyone, thank you for being here today to connect and ask questions regarding the current unearthed and Origin challenge referencing where to next. Today, we're going to go over quickly what the challenge entails, and we will have a brief overview of what we're looking for today from potential innovators. And then I will hand over to Hayden, who is from the Origin team and a subject matter expert, and he will take us through the challenge, why it matters, the background of the challenge. And hopefully this can answer some of your questions ahead of time. After that, I'll take back over and we will walk through how to submit a challenge through the Unearth platform. And then finally, we will cover off on any questions and answers in the remainder of the session. We do have several questions that have come up through email already, so I'll start the session with those, but please feel free to pop any questions that you have as they come up throughout the day in the chat, and we can hopefully move through those at the end of the session. So I'd like to introduce the team from Origin who have connected with Unearth to deliver this challenge. So we have Sarah Bishop, who is the Chief Production Engineer, and she originally connected with us about this particular challenge that Origin have within their business. And then we've got Hayden Kendall, who will be talking today, and he is the Program Innovation Lead. So we've worked closely with these two Origin employees to deliver this challenge through our platform. I'd like to hand over to Hayden, who should be in the room, to take us through some of the reasons why this challenge is so important to Origin and what Origin deliver as a business.
Hi, thanks, Jake, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So the original challenge was around, at times we have up to 12 rigs in the field completing interventions on our wells that have had subsurface failures. To date, the prioritization of these activities has been completed all manually based on the geographical knowledge that the schedulers hold for their own assets. So there's several challenges, I guess, when scheduling out these interventions. We're working on private landowners' properties, so there's terms of access conditions for entering those properties. Some of those properties require separate washdowns before entering and leaving those properties. We have conditions with local council around access on local roads. And then we've got the geographic footprint of both the internal asset and then our sister assets that are spread across Western Queensland there. So the challenge was, how do we effectively know which is the best well site to go to from workover to workover? And internally, we're working on a model, I guess, to rank and prioritize the value of each workover. So we'll have an input into whatever solution that you guys come up with that'll show us the highest value opportunity wells. But the secondary challenge is, how do you execute that to minimize non-productive time for our rigs, because we pay for these by the hour. So minimize travel time between our well sites, make sure we're not completing unnecessary washdowns, make sure we're not violating terms of access or no-go areas. So this is the challenge today, is how do we effectively reduce the non-productive time of our rigs by utilizing some technology to leverage our GIS data and effectively work through that list in the most effective way. I think with any change, there's always a resistance to fully automate a solution straight through to our schedule, with fear that it may not be correct, or there may not be the full quantity of challenges known, such as things which it's hard to plan for, such as weather, or a landowner may be mustering that area, etc. So I think for this challenge, the initial scope would be to have a recommender, which would still have the human doing the final scheduling piece. And then once we build confidence in the system and there's additional learnings, we could then potentially take it to a fully integrated offering, so straight into our SAP P6 Primavera suite. Some of the other opportunities, I think, which we would like to explore is, we kind of mentioned that we typically have rigs based at an asset, but there'll come a point in time where the highest value opportunities may exist in one of our additional assets, and when does the best value case come up to stand that rig down that one asset and move it to the next. So looking to understand some data and costs associated with that to make that business decision to move that rig to chase the highest value opportunity. I think that's primarily the overview of the challenge. So I think, the opportunity is, if successful, we're keen to work with you guys to build this out and trial the technology and see at one of our assets, gain some feedback and see what we both can learn. And as an opportunity, if it's successful, we potentially expand it to the rest of our workover rigs. Jake, did you want to talk about the timeline?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, thanks, Hayden. Thanks for that information. If we're going to talk about the timeline, we have already launched a challenge. We're now open for submissions, and the close is coming up on at the end of this month. So we've got the close out on next Friday. So we've got another week to submit after the event today, and hopefully we can answer any questions and drive towards submissions from innovators within the room. It'll be really good then, once we've got everything in hand, to catch up with Hayden and Sarah and the wider team to discuss the submissions that we've received, and we will then be looping back towards innovators probably in around 2 months. And then we will move towards scoping and implementation with those chosen to move forward, who potentially have offered the best solution through their submission. As always, we really appreciate people's time, not only today, but also time in email and also submissions. So we always really appreciate that at Unearthed, and we appreciate the engagement. If we're going to talk about submissions to the platform, if anyone has any particular issues with that, please reach out to either Alex or myself. But what the best case scenario is to log on to unearthed.solutions. Here you can see on our homepage our current challenges with all of our industry partners. From there, we can go into the Origin Where To Next challenge. Here you can create a login for yourself. If you already have a login through participation in other community activities and other challenges previously, you can use this historic one. If not, please create a login at this point. And then what we will do is click submission and participate. And then this will take you through to a submission page where there's going to be probably, it depends on how in depth you want to get, but somewhere between 20 and maybe 45 minutes worth of questions the ability to upload slide decks as well for additional information whilst in review. And in theory, this will be populated by us and shared with the Origin team after the event, who will analyze and review and feedback on submissions. So yeah, really grateful for the time spent on this. And as I said, always appreciate innovators engaging with our industrial challenges. I think we're running a bit ahead of time. We've moved through things pretty quickly there, and it gives us more time and opportunity to discuss any questions that the floor might have. I've seen a few come in on chat already, which is great. I'm going to just work through a couple here that we've got in via email already, just to get the ball rolling. And I'll work through these with Hayden. And yeah, please add any into the chat as we go. So Hayden, if we start off the Q&A here with the guys in the room, how many teams will be successful ultimately?
At the moment, we're, I guess, looking to select the best offering and then work with that to trial at one site. I guess depending on that trial, we may choose a no-go or go decision on that. And if it's a no-go, we may look to a second offering to see what opportunity that provides as well.
Okay, no problem. And the second question is Origin looking for one complete solution or parts of an overall solution?
Yeah, good question. So this feeds into part of a bigger solution around end-to-end well intervention planning. So this would feed into a bigger piece of the puzzle. The scope of this one for the challenge is really around taking the inputs, taking a ranked list of priority wells, and then being able to effectively execute them in the most efficient way in the field, minimizing that non-productive time for the rigs. I think, like I said, there's further opportunity to build on that. Should we see value, like I said, the ability to better use that tool for decision making to move rigs between assets and things like that. I guess it's one of those things. If there's innovation out there that we're not aware, like you're not aware of what you're not aware of. So if someone brings something as an opportunity to the table, we look to explore.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Another question here is, what kind of partnership are you looking for with the winning team?
I mean, we're open to different opportunities. I think ideally, whatever the opportunity is that comes up, we would like to work with the team to trial and develop it. And if successful, I think we would have to look to formally bring that person on board with contracts and such to secure their product for the future. That's sort of where we'd be looking.
Okay, great. And I know we covered this briefly before in the timeline, but another question here is when do you plan on implementing the solution? This was ahead of time, a question ahead of time today.
Yeah, I think I guess depending on the work involved to integrate our systems with whatever the solution is, it's probably looking around that end of Q2, Q3 next financial year. So we have a quite extensive GIS system and data, but depending on what the solution utilizes, there may be requirements to do additional field GIS work to be able to have the correct data points for the solution to work.
Okay. And one final question that we received ahead of the webinar today was, do the potential solutions need to originate from within Australia or an Australian distributor or branch?
I think the preference is always to support Australian companies and products where possible. And I think being able to meet face to face and work on this collaboratively together is important. Not to rule out something in international business, but I just think, you know, there would definitely be a competitive edge being Australian business.
Okay, thanks for that. Hopefully that added some additional texture from questions that we received ahead of the webinar, and thank you for everyone that sent those in. If we move on to the floor now, I know you've already answered this one, Hayden, but I'll just ask it again just for a bit more clarity potentially. So why is it necessary to continue to use Primavera as the final interface?
Yeah, so currently we use there's a couple of tools that we use. Like SAP is our ERP system that holds all the data, and then we run a Dymo planning tool over top of that. The business is in progress to moving to Primavera P6 for all its scheduling. So Primavera P6 is currently used for rig workover and drilling activities, and we're transitioning all our operations and maintenance scheduling across to Primavera. So the benefit there is to be able to have everything in the one tool, and then that way you can much easily plan activities and shelter things under workovers while the well's down, and group activities. So that's why Primavera is the required output.
Okay. The next question we've got here, which is from Alexandro, which is, hello Hayden, how does a regular service day look, and what is involved from planning and execution?
I'm not too sure what we mean by a regular service day. I can talk a bit about what's involved from the planning and execution real briefly. So typically we'll have a well that has a subsurface failure. A P will diagnose that, and then they'll create a workover, a well intervention request. We have our own system for raising that, and they'll put in all the requirements of what they need to be executed as part of that workover. There's a bunch of constraints at the end of that needs to be completed in the field, such as civil activities and isolation and mechanical and electrical breakdown of that well site. So the schedulers meet once a week with the production engineers currently. They look at the list that's ready to execute. So that means those activities have been cleared and the land access is approved. And then they work through to sequence that list of wells based on a number of factors at the moment. Value, production. They're trying to group and cluster wells in similar, like in the one landowner's property, so they're not ping-ponging the rig from one end of the field to the other. It could take up to 2 hours to drive from the top of the field to the bottom of the field, for example. So trying to sequence those wells in a way that they can most effectively complete that. But that is all done purely based on the geographical knowledge of the scheduler at that asset. They know that, the wells in this paddock require this wash down. So therefore, I'm going to do these three together. I'm going to move that one from the bottom of the list to the top of the list. I can do these together, and then I'll move it over to here because I know I've got 5 wells that are going to be roughly ready over here. That's all done manually currently. And I guess, if we have a scheduler take leave or we lose schedulers, move to another business, and that knowledge goes with them, and we have to retrain people on that field knowledge.
Sure thing. Thanks for that, Hayden. So one final question here that should be a short answer. So it says, is this challenge strictly around planning and the movements of rigs? Does it entertain solutions around rig electrical compliance, safety, preventative measures, or is that going to be something separate?
Yeah, so this challenge is strictly around the planning and scheduling of those workover rigs. Potentially there could be something in the future around like rig optimization itself, as far as understanding value in doing certain activities as part of that workover versus doing it. Do you do a cheaper workover and expect a to do that workover twice in a 12-month period, or do you do a more expensive workover and expect to do that less in the future? But this one is purely around the scheduling.
Okay. Another quick question that we fielded ahead of time would be, does the solution have to be able to be utilized in the field remotely via an app or something similar like that? So inputs can be placed in real time as opposed to at head office or sent back and forth between head office and those in the field?
Yeah, so I think the solution, you need to be able to access from the site offices in the field, as well as Brisbane, where our head office is. I think an opportunity for a solution would be, once that route optimization has been completed and scheduled, how do you give someone like the rig crew an app as such that they could follow the approved access tracks in the field, so they didn't go through a no-go zone or somewhere that they weren't meant to be, as well as they're taking the optimal route because it's on like a GPS, for example.
Okay, thank you. Sheppy's just put in a question. So what are the different types of stakeholders in a project and what are their respective roles and responsibilities? Can you provide some examples to help clarify their involvement?
Stakeholders in the project, are we talking about, maybe just for my own clarity for the question, is it around the users or / customers of the project, or are you more talking at a higher level as far as the business or?
I can't answer for Sheppy, but let's talk about, if we're talking about stakeholders, let's talk about internal to Origin.
Yep, so the key people that would be utilizing this tool would be our site scheduling and planning teams, in conjunction with our production engineering teams and our land liaison teams. So as mentioned, there's a whole heap of gates that need to be cleared to be able to complete a workover. So different approvals need to be in place. We currently have a process and a program where we track all those approvals. Once they're all turned green, the planning team would be able to take those approved list of wells that have been ranked in priority into whatever the solution that we come up with. It would interface with our GIS system and data to provide an approved sequence that was optimized to minimize rig time and ensure that we're providing minimal impact to landowners and the local community with traveling on the roads, etc. So the main stakeholder in the project would be the asset-based site planning teams.
Okay. Another question just in from Josh. Are there any constraints besides workover rig capacities that you'd like to consider as part of the scheduling, e.g. CapEx budget per quarter?
So I think budget and economics has the opportunity to come into it. Like I say, sort of mentioned earlier, an advanced opportunity would be able to understand economically when would it make sense to move a rig from one asset to another asset, which might be 300 kilometers away, and you're talking multiple road trains of equipment, plus the downtime for that rig. It's not working wells over during that period. It'd be interesting to have the data, if the system was able to calculate the data and say, based on the highest value wells are now sitting in another asset versus these low production wells that are sitting in your asset, the NPV to move that workover rig now stacks up, and this is NPV, and this is the reason you're going to have this much non-productive time. However, the uplift you would see by moving it would outweigh your lost time for the rig, for example.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for the question. We've had another one from Manuel. How many mobile assets are you considering as data sources, and how is the connectivity situation? Is there an existing internet connection?
Yep, so at our sites generally have 4G coverage. There's quite a few places where there is no coverage in the field. Depending on how you're creating your solution, I'm not too sure whether that's a major impact for the actual scheduling side. So for the scheduling side, we have our own in-house full GIS data suite, which has all the features captured as you like, such as property boundaries and our landowner, the landowner and who the contact is for that person, the access tracks, the no-go zones. So a lot of the solution can be done in a desktop space prior, but there will be, I said, we talk about like providing the rigs or something like that, a TomTom as such to take that optimized route. Yeah, the data the 4G connection can be patchy out there.
Okay. And just for those of us who have never experienced life out on the asset and in amongst the wells, how big of a geographical area are we talking in terms of maybe east to west, north to south, or is it hard to deliver that succinctly?
Sarah, if you had to guess, would it be 500 Ks between Spring Gully and Tlingurana?
I mean, potentially. The thing is, you get into some assets and you may see the well site, but you actually have to go uphill, down dales and round the back door to actually gain access to that site. So it's not access just as the crow flies. It's actually quite a lot of geographical maneuvering on roads and access tracks before you can actually get from well site to well site. So that would add significantly to the travel time and the arrangement of the workover rigs.
Sort of as mentioned before there, like it could take 2 hours to get from the top of one field to the bottom of one field. That's within the same asset. So
okay, thanks for that additional insight there. I'd like to just take the time to ask the floor if there's any other questions. There's none that have come in on the chat. Yeah, happy to field any more questions. If not, as we draw towards past here in Western Australia, I don't know where it is, wherever you are in the world, but it could be a good place to finish if there's no additional questions. I'll just give it a couple of seconds to see if anything else comes through.
Are you taking questions orally, or do we have to put them in the chat?
Yeah, we can open it up already for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I do have a question. So this is Owen Plowman from Actinum, and I'm the person who asked the question about the use of Primavera as the final user interface. And I'm very confused by what you've said, because it sounds like you want a tool that will prioritize and schedule the workovers, but then you have to take all that schedule information and put it into Primavera, where more scheduling will be done. So then you'll have schedules that are out of sync. So can you clarify exactly what the workflow and business process is around the use of this tool and the use of Primavera, because they seem to be at odds with one another?
Yeah, so kind of touched on it earlier. What we see in our business is, and the strong feedback from the site is that the solution that we implement, they don't want to have direct schedule into Primavera for a start, because based on previous experience, this has created a lot of rework. So the scheduling of this will take the rank priority of value workovers, utilize the GIS data to provide the optimal routing and sequencing based on the priority of the well to reduce the non-productive time of the rig, the travel time, and provide it in a ranked list with some tracking and routing data the schedulers will sequence those in Primavera manually from the output. As I guess we're able to prove faith in the solution, they will then look to potentially integrate direct with Primavera.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any further oral questions or any additional questions through the chat, or is that a good place to end it today? Okay, if that's all the questions for the day, that's great. Just we've had one last one come in. Is it possible to get an example of how shift reports look like now? Is that possible after the event, Hayden?
Yeah, Manuel, if you maybe just want to clarify what you mean by shift report.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, we would like to understand if it's possible to get an example of how the documentation that you're looking at, or at the scheduler is looking at, looks like now, like how what information already is existing, what he's considering, and how the results of the decision of the scheduling look like that they transmit to whoever this information is relevant to.
Yeah, look, I'll work with, well, Jacob will try and pull together some slides to try and sort of show the view of what we're sort of seeing now and what the outputs are now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I think what we can do as well is that we'll follow up with the slide deck, because there's obviously been a question around that, which we're more than happy to share. And we'll work with Hayden, as he said, to deliver some visibility on the current system, if he and the team are happy to do that. If there's no additional questions, I'd like to just thank everyone for their time. It's great to come together like this. Obviously, it's great to connect and also ask any questions face to face. We are running ahead of time, which is good. We get additional half an hour back in our day, which is awesome. Submissions close on the 5th of May, which is next Friday. We will look to get additional information out. I'd probably think either tomorrow or on Monday, regarding additional views of the interface, etc., from Hayden and his team. And yeah, please keep an eye out for further comms. And thank you all for your time, and thank you for any submissions off the back of this event.